All right. So I think now, inshallah, we'll go ahead and get started. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih nabiy al-Kareem. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alim al-Hakim. Allahumma la fahma lana illa ma fahamtana innaka antal jawad al-Kareem. Wa qur rabbi zidni ilma. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah, this is the I want to say our fourth class. I know last week, unfortunately, I wasn't able to hold the class. I was not feeling very well. So thank you all for your patience and for joining again this week. Inshallah, we'll make up that class. We'll try to make up that class either 2 in a week or perhaps a follow-up week. But based on, inshallah, everybody's availability, we'll schedule it in that way, inshallah. And I'll ask that a little bit closer to the end of the series, so that way we can see which schedules, kind of what setup works best for everyone, inshallah. We can go that way. So that being said, just continuing, I wanted to recap that we had spoken about in all the previous classes about depression. We spoke about sadness. We spoke about what people generally think of when they think of mental health. Generally, again, what people interpret from mental health or what they understand is subjects relating to depression, sadness, death, dying, loneliness. And while, of course, that's definitely true, and it can be one of the reasons why someone feels sadness, grief, unhappiness, etc., it's not the only reason. And that's also not the only subject when we talk about mental health and wellness. So for our series on interacting with Hadith, mental health and wellness, I wanted to do it in sort of like a segmented fashion, where we could look at different areas where Hadith can explore mental health. And because, of course, Hadith is sort of like a path or a lifestyle that we can use as a guide for ourselves in every way. Any category or subject in your life that you may need guidance or counsel in, this is what the best example for us is: the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, the story of the Sahaba and the lives of the Salaf al-Salihin, the righteous scholars of the past, and even scholars and successful people who have lived a harmonious life, living their regular lives and managing their well-being. I say that because there are so many instances where people go through difficulty in life that for most people, that's sort of the end of their rope. They throw in the towel and say, well, you know what? I went through this difficulty. That's it for me. It really goes back down to what our expectations were and what we thought life is and what we thought of this very dunya that we're living in, is that our perception was skewed. And what that means is that if you look at generations in the early 1900s, just 100 years ago, just 120 years ago, what were people's lives like? It was not very easy. It was not very comfortable in the sense that you didn't physically have to do anything or experience any pain and suffering. Pretty much everybody went through that on a grand scale, on a significantly grander scale. Why? Because they didn't have the luxuries of that automated lifestyle. They didn't have the luxuries of a comfortable, peaceful lifestyle. I mean, peaceful is subjective, but a comfortable lifestyle where everything's automated and we are becoming less and less capable of doing certain things. Because of that expectation, because of that lifestyle, we don't even need to look 120 years ago, to be honest. Just look at life 50 years ago. 50 years ago in America today, whichever part of the world you're in, just look at it from 50 years ago. How different was life? We read a hadith about the famous hadith of Jabir, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is teaching the Sahaba, and he says, or Jibril alayhi salam is teaching everybody, the Sahaba, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he asks the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, an amaratiha, what are the signs of the day of judgment? So, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, antara al-hufat al-urat you see the barefooted, naked, disheveled Bedouin in the desert, yatatawaluna fil bunyan, competing with one another in building high-rise buildings. It's a very interesting concept. The Prophet is telling us that one of the signs of the Day of Judgment is that you'll have these Bedouins, Arab Bedouins in the desert, competing to build high-rise buildings. So if you look at Dubai 60 years ago, 70 years ago, go to one of their museums, just 50, 60 years ago, it's what it was. It was a complete desert landscape. And now it's these high-rise buildings, competition, right? Every year it seems like another Gulf nation or Arab nation is competing to build the next highest tower. So in any case, going back, right? Physical labor, hardships, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, life was very different. It wasn't as comfortable and as, kick back. As a result, however, of modernity, globalization, life becoming easier, more comfortable, people have generally, especially, of course, younger and younger people that are constantly being born and raised into this world that we live in now, they are realizing more how much more difficult life can be, but the smallest inconvenience can cause people to completely give up hope. The smallest inconvenience. You take my phone away, my phone runs out of charge, my phone loses battery life. It's the end of the world, quite literally for most people, for many people. Why this is relevant is because when we are talking about the difficulties that people experienced and still persevered, this is sort of, we use that and we use that as fuel. We use those stories as fuel to continue moving forward. As a matter of fact, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Quran. He says that some of the stories of the past we have shared with you and some we have not shared with you. But the objective of this, لِنُثَبِّتَ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ أو كما قال جل وعلا, that the verse essentially states that Allah shared these stories of the previous prophets and what they went through in life, so that what? So that we may fortify your heart, O Messenger of Allah. Why? Because life is going to have challenges. At that time, there was challenges. In our era and our time, life is going to have challenges. We live in the world, Darul Musibah. We live in the world of affliction. Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir. This life is like a prison for the believer. It's not a paradise. We don't live on paradise. We're going to paradise. We are not in paradise. So again, this sounds so redundant, and I apologize if this even sounds condescending even. That's not my purpose. The reason why I'm saying this is because when we experience life, many people give up hope because life's not easy. Whereas life was never meant to be easy. We have to acknowledge that before we wake up every morning. We have to realize that, recognize that. Some days will be nice, but some days will not. And how this all ties back into this, what you see on your screen, or the subject today, which is, love and life, right? Love and life. Why is this relevant? Is because the next category that I wanted to just speak about has to do with our experiences in love. But just before that, I actually wanted to share another incident, just another quick story. Two quick things. about our perception of what life is like and our perception moving forward when we talk about mental health and wellness through the Sunnah, is that the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says that shayabatni huda wa akhawatuha, that the chapter of Hud in the Quran gave the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gray hair in his beard. Now, it may not have done so literally, but the reason why he mentioned that is because of the stories in that chapter. If anyone goes home, inshallah, maybe this will be your homework assignment for the week, go home and read Surah Hud, just that surah, and read the translation if you have to, but just read the whole surah. You will see so many different stories there and the difficulties that Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam went through and their experiences. And that's why the Prophet said it gave me gray hairs on my beard, because it stressed me out. It overwhelmed me. But yet again, you still continue and you still function. There was a great scholar of Hadith in the 19th century or late 20th century. He mentions, his name is Maulana Khalil Ahmad Saharanpuri from India. And something amazing about him is that he was a Shaykh of Hadith, an expert in the field and subject of Hadith memorization, teaching whether Hadith was strong or weak or fabricated. And he was also the spiritual Shaykh of the town that he was in. He was the Murabbi, he was the Shaykh, and he would give spiritual guidance to the people in his village of Saharanpur, which is actually a relatively large space, a big space. It's not a small city. So he was the Shaykh of the town, Shaykh of the village, and Shaykh Khalil Ahmad, very interesting thing about him is that he saw and witnessed in his lifetime every single one of his children either get sick and die, or die due to some ailment or due to some incident or some experience or some situation. And anybody who might, and he had like 11 children, like I think it was like either between 8 or 11 children. And Shaykh Khalil Ahmad never gave up the work that he was doing. He never gave up being a spiritual mentor to others. He never gave up being a teacher of Hadith. He never gave up on all of the things that he studied to do and become. And, I think there's a great inspiration in that story to allow a person to read about someone who was just maybe about 80 years ago, 90 years ago, and great scholar of Hadith, great Shaykh, spiritual Shaykh and guide, and yet all of his children dies in his lifetime. How does a person experience? What do you experience going through something like that? How do you keep on going? And not only just keep on going like holding on by a thread, but keep on going in the sense that you are still functionally at your peak, despite internally maybe suffering. So that was all a introduction to love and life, which is another section or segment of exploring mental health and wellness through the Sunnah of the Prophet or the Hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So I wanted to share a couple Hadith. Inshallah, we'll have some discussion as well, hopefully. I don't want anyone to forget, I want this to be engaging, inshallah. So, first Hadith, Hadith number 6, is a Hadith of Tirmidhi, which is an awesome, interesting Hadith. ألا وإن لكم على نسائكم حقا ولنسائكم عليكم حقا فأما حقكم على نسائكم فلا يوطئن فرشكم من تكرهون ولا يأذن في بيوتكم لمن تكرهون ألا وإن حقهن عليكم أن تحسنوا إليهن في كسوتهن وطعامهن أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Certainly, you men have a right upon your wives, and your wives have a right upon you. As for your rights over your wives, it is what? That you should not allow anyone into your home, meaning this is directed to the women. You should not allow anyone into your home whom your husband may disapprove of, or may cause discomfort to him. As for your rights over your husbands, now this is addressed, this is for the women to their husbands. You should take, this is for the men towards their women. You should take care of their expenses, their necessities, as is within your means. And I'm going to clarify both of this, all of these points now. But let's just look at this hadith for a moment. Okay, let's look at this hadith for a moment. This hadith talks about a few different things. It obviously is talking about rights, men and women. But I want to, of course, hear from all of you first, sort of kind of been our habit as of late, to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Not just, well, I'll leave it open actually. I don't want to influence your answers. What do you think the overall theme of this hadith is? Let's take a couple of answers in the chat box, inshallah. And let's start with that. What do you think the overall theme is here? And what do you think maybe is a point of significance here? What do you notice as a point of interest, a point of significance? Maybe mention one or two things. What do you think the theme of this hadith is in particular? So that way, inshallah, we can go through it. We'll get a couple answers. And I know this doesn't sound politically correct. Let me make mention of that too. Definitely is not something that seems like you could get away with giving a Jummah khutbah about, and then all of a sudden, there isn't a riot outside. Okay. So contentment with what the husband can afford, respecting the sanctity of the marriage, home, rights and obligations, caring, a sense of security, financial, physical, emotional, is both spouses' responsibility. That's a very interesting one. Establishing a sense of security. So Shakib said security is a theme, which has other categories underneath it, but it's each person's responsibility. Okay, that's a very interesting way. Trust both ways, absolutely. The Islamic structure of the society and the hikmah behind it. Absolutely. Very good answers. Oh, interesting take on that. So Trevor says, mentioning the things that are overlooked by each gender. That's an interesting take on it, because here the hadith is saying this is a haqq, this is a right, which I guess you would think that if something is a haqq or a huquq, it would be a primary concept found within marriages. And based on your comment, Trevor, it seems like almost you're saying that that's not found and it's overlooked, perhaps based on the way marriages are today. And I maybe wouldn't even disagree with that. But again, very interesting perspective. So very good. Very good responses, mashallah, engaging. So yeah, let's take a look at this hadith a little bit. Let's take a deep dive here. One of the areas that is definitely talking about is equity in the marriage. So marital equity can also be seen as the extent to which each partner has status in the relationship, and whether that status is equal between partners. Now, inshallah, we're going to get back to this, but pay attention to what this is saying. It's saying the extent to which each partner has a status in the marriage and whether that is equal. It's not saying whether the marriage is equal. It's saying whether the status within the marriage is equal. Okay. And also pay attention to the fact that I use the word equity here and not equality. Selfless behavior, which basically means when you do things not for yourself, but for the other person. This is opposite to selfish, where you do things only for yourself, constitutes higher marital satisfaction overall. And gender differences between men and women are necessary to examine. So there's a few things that should be said here. Inshallah, we're gonna, go over that as well. The first thing is the first line here. Okay. The first thing is this first line here, where this says the status that each partner shares in the relationship and whether that status is equal between partners. Okay. Now, why is this important? Equality and equity. There's a very big difference here. Equality means essentially we're looking at everything straight down the middle, 50-50. Now, for anyone who's not married, this is non-existent in marriages. Okay. For those of you who are not married, there is no such thing as equality in marriage in the literal sense. No marriage is 50-50 down the middle. Okay. You can be in certain things, but no marriage truly is 50-50 down the middle. That's point number one. Point number two is that a successful marriage will be equitable. And equity in a marriage essentially looks like what this is saying, the status is equal, is that a man will do what is his responsibility, and a woman will do what is her responsibility. And in the fulfillment of each person doing their task, that makes the marriage equal. Now let's take a general example here. General in the sense that I'm going to use a traditional example that often is applicable to most relationships. I'm not talking about the exceptions to the rule. I'm talking about the general rule here. The man is the breadwinner. The man is the protector. The man is the guardian of the home, guardian of the finances, guardian of the income, tarbiyah, whatever. And the woman is generally the caretaker of the home, the responsible one of the home, purchases groceries, cleans the home, cooks the meals, raises the children. This is generally what we're looking at. Okay. If for husband and wife, each person fulfills their obligations, and that's understood to be their obligations, that marriage has an incredibly higher success rate than if that marriage had forcibly brought a 50-50 responsibility down the middle in it. Why? Because in each person's role, there is equality. Why? Because they're doing what their role is. It's equitable. It's fair. The marriage is fair. And in it being fair, it's equal. And when we say equal, we mean each person is bringing what they are capable of bringing to the marriage. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because the point here is not to say one is better than the other. That's a bastardization of the understanding of equity and equality and being equitable in a marriage. So please, nobody misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm saying that in your individual role, you do that role that you're comfortable with, and the marriage is happy. In that, there's equality and fairness and completeness in the entirety of that marriage. Okay. The second thing is selfless behavior in the marriage. Now, if we look at the hadith itself, let's see how we can identify all of these points, right? The first thing is talking about that I had mentioned was the equitability. Obviously, this hadith is referring to something which is not 50-50 down the middle. It's talking about something that's fair. The man's right over his wife is that, hey, don't bring anybody into the home that I don't like. Don't, have people inside of my home. The woman is saying, take care of my necessities. Take care of my needs. Okay? Those two things are not the same. They're different. They're very different. But what's the equitable piece here? Is the fulfillment and the basically the Prophet ﷺ is emphasizing here that we need to be just in the fulfillment of that right which is upon us. That's the first point, right? The equitability. The second thing is a selflessness factor. Selflessness here is somebody may argue that's not fair. I don't want to have to, take care of her needs. I got to take care of her needs and responsibilities. No. Time out. If you want that she does what you need to do what she needs. And this is a selflessness. Why? Because if it's saying that husband needs to take care of his wife's responsibilities, I understand that. I want to say again, generally, I want to understand that generally most men will be totally fine with taking care of the needs of their home, of their wives, of their families and children. But there are also marriages where a man will say, I don't want to play the role of the breadwinner. I want you to contribute everything. So it's a reversal of those traditional family norms or ideals, which may work. They may be the exception, but they are certainly not the general norm, okay, or the standard practice here. So we see that there is definitely a degree of selflessness here, okay? And then, of course, the third category being that the gender differences, okay? And inshallah, we're going to discuss these in detail as well, but you can also clearly see that there's a difference here. The woman is being told, the man is being told to take care of his wife in the sense that she needs his support to provide for her. And the man here needs his wife for what looks like emotional support, right? It's kind of what the hadith is hinting towards. So again, let's explain that further, okay? Men's rights. Let's explore this first and foremost. Okay. The first part of this hadith talks about men's rights. Okay. So it says, فَأَمَّا حَقُّكُمْ عَلَى نِسَائِكُمْ فَلَا يُوطِئَنَّ فُرُشَكُمْ مَنْ تَكْرَهُونَ. So you not allowing anyone into your home whom your husband may disapprove of, or cause discomfort to. Okay, this is essentially stating that you don't want the man, this is being directed to the woman, that do not allow any man into your home, or do not allow any person, not just man, of course, that's totally haram, but do not allow any person to enter into the home who your husband may be uncomfortable with, who your husband may not be, it may cause him discomfort. Okay. So number one, home is a sanctuary. Let's discuss this. If the home is a sanctuary for the man, let's explore this potential perspective, okay? If men are more the breadwinners, they are more social outside of the home, they have to interact and interface with 15, 20 different types of people on a daily basis, okay? Let's just explore this option. If men have to talk to about 15 to 20 different type of people every day, you have the secretary, you have the boss, you have the worker, you have the stranger on the street, you have this crazy guy on, yelling at you, you have your, responsibilities and emails and meetings, and let's just say that's your life. You have to interact with all of these different people, and your sanctuary is you come home. Your safe place is your home. Now, if you have to put on a show and an image in public a particular way, when you come home, your home is your place of sukoon. Your home, like Allah says in the Quran, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. Allah has made husband and wife for what purpose? That you may live in peace with them. Okay? That you may live in peace with your wife. So if your home is supposed to be a place of sukoon and peace and tranquility, and you're just been busy all day at work, when you come home, what do you want to do? You want to relax. You want to be with your wife and children. You want to be in the comfort of your home. Okay? And now, let's just say, perchance, your wife invites random people to the house, or invites guests, or invites people that you're not really comfortable with, or brings family over. And, you really didn't give her permission to do that. What does it do? It normally disrupts your peace. It disrupts that environment of your home being a sanctuary. Let me give you another example. When young people get married, it is often a customary practice that the newlywed couple lives with the husband's family, or the husband's family lives in the home of the newlywed couple, right? It's a customary practice, maybe because parents are older, maybe because they're saving money, maybe whatever. So, okay, all of those reasons are valid. But what is also valid? The discomfort of the husband and wife, the newlyweds. And what's even more valid is the discomfort of the husband based on this hadith. Because now he wants to come home and relax. You can't. Why? Because you have to make sure you maintain that presence in front of your guests. You can't act how you want and dress how you want and be how you want, reclining on the sofa how you want. No, you have to be attentive to your guests. So this hints and indicates towards the home being a sanctuary space for the husband. Therefore, if you, O woman, are Rabbul Bayt, if you, O woman, are as we'll read inshallah in the very next slide, the responsible one of the home itself, then prepare that home in such a fashion for your husband that he can call it a sanctuary and that he will not be uncomfortable in his own home. Number two, compatibility between husband and wife. This is what I was alluding to. Okay. If the husband comes home and his in-laws are there or they're living with him, it's not the in-laws that are necessarily a problem. It's the fact that there's someone else there in my home. You can't really be comfortable. As a marriage family therapist by profession, the one thing I often tell people is when you are planning to get married, actually, there was a nikah of someone I performed not too long ago. And right before the nikah, I had forgotten to ask if they had a living setup or a housing setup in place already. And one of the things the guy said to me was that, no, we plan to live with my dad for the first year, and then afterwards we'll get our own place. Now, the issue was that one of the biggest conflict areas for them was his father. So now he had decided to live with him. And, I just sort of made it clear to him that, hey, subhanAllah, this might be an issue for you because you're living with the person that's causing you the most grief. And, ultimately became a point of discussion. But the point is that this is a very true experience. Okay. And number three, disapproval towards from disapproval to discontentment. And of course, what this basically means is that if your husband ultimately is dissatisfied, unhappy, forced to be at home with other people there, and he's unable to be comfortable in his space, what can this lead to? Unhappiness. This can lead to discontentment. This can lead to resentment. This can lead to a ton of conflict. So these are some of the rights of the man based on this hadith. Now, what about the rights of the woman in the same hadith? So again, the Prophet says, ألا وإن حقهن عليكم أن تحسنوا إليهن في كسوتهن وطعامهن. As for your rights over your husbands, that you should take care of their expenses, necessities, as is within your means. Now, number one, home is her sanctuary. Okay? In a very famous hadith, we learned that ألا كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. ألا وإن الرجل راع في أهل بيته. And the second part of that is that وأن المرأة راعية في بيت زوجها أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. That the man is the responsible person and the sort of the shepherd to his flock of his entire family. So if you look at it from like a top-down approach, the man is responsible for everything. But the woman, she is ra'iyatun fi bayti zawjiha. She is responsible for the home of her husband. Now, I know this kind of sounds like another right of the husband here, but how does this apply to the woman's right? Why? Because remember, the hadith says that she should make the house of the husband comfortable for her husband, right? He should feel comfortable in the home. This again alludes to the fact that she's the one in charge of the home itself. Because the hadith says, رَاعِيَةٌ فِي بَيْتِ زَوْجِهَا, that home of her husband, she is responsible for it. Okay, so now, using this hadith here that you're looking at, and the hadith that I mentioned that she is responsible for the home of her husband, does it not make sense that if she's responsible for the home, inside of the home, that the inside of her home should also be taken care of then? It should be a place that she would want to live. It should be a place that she should be able to cook and eat and be comfortable in. Naturally, yes. Yes. She should be comfortable. Her clothing should be taken care of. Her necessities, feminine hygiene products, what she needs in the home to make the home suitable, food, clothing, take care of her needs. Okay, supportive needs need to be met. Now, let's explain this further. Number one, if she is responsible for her home and she is responsible for the inside of that home and everything associated to that, then her needs should be met in regards to that home. Okay, if that's the agreement. That means you cannot cheap out on taking care of her clothing. You cannot cheap out on taking care of her food. You cannot cheap out on, bare minimum necessities. And I'll mention a very interesting story here. Abu Sufyan, Sahabi, was married to Hind, also Sahabiya. Hind, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she actually complained to the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, and she said to him, O Messenger of Allah, Abu Sufyan is a penny pincher. He's a bit of a cheap man, and he doesn't give me enough money. It's very interesting. He doesn't give me enough money to take care of my necessities of the home. So what did the Prophet ﷺ advise her? He said to her, take need from him to fulfill your needs, but don't go overboard. Don't go overboard, which is very interesting. So again, if she was able to steal, which is not stealing, to take care of her basic necessities, how could any man, father-in-law, whoever, look at this example and say that the woman has to be ultimately completely subservient to her husband no matter what he provides? This would not be fair. This would be unjust. And there's a lot of skewed ideals out there that exist with regards to this thing. Many men have financial capacity. Many men have the ability to take care of it. But either one, they're ignorant and they don't know. And number two, it's also very probable that they have been told the wrong thing. And so therefore they think that, oh no, I'm the man. الرجال قوامون على النساء, that men are dominant over their women. What does that mean? Physically only? No, this means that you are the responsible caretaker of your home. Okay. Now I will mention one more thing and then we'll move on, which is that women in these situations tend to get divorced when they're limited and they're restricted tremendously. What ends up happening as a result, and this is more of an education piece, like sort of like a long-term education piece for everyone really, is that in Islam, there's no concept of like financial security post-iddat, post-divorce for the woman. Okay, there's child support for the children, but Islamically, there's no real concept of like the husband giving alimony to the wife. That being said, why is this even up for conversation as much as it has been in recent years? It's because this conversation about what men need to do to spend on their wives and take care of their homes is not being had. It's not. Women are paying for those responsibilities. Women are paying for half the expenses of the home. Again, just as a reminder, I'm not talking about the exceptions to the rule. I'm talking about the general rule, which is that men would be the providers. And oftentimes it leads to a lot of conflict, leading to a divorce, leading to everything sort of falling apart, which then, of course, as a result of that, then the woman is divorced after X amount of years, maybe with children, and then she's left high and dry with no means of taking care of herself. Right? No means of taking care of herself. And one way to prevent that, or one way to navigate that or manage that, is to have our young men educated in this regard, that you take care of your wife and that woman will take care of your home. It works two ways. right? But again, as a reminder that this is how things should be in the best case scenario. So awareness is extremely important. Despite all the similarities, the two sexes do live in rather different social worlds. The difference between men and women, it's evident. It's very clear. We need to know men and women function differently. So for someone to make the argument that why is her rights different and his rights different? Well, it's because we function differently, right? Even till this very day, if someone were to make the argument that, oh, this hadith is applicable only, back then, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, it's a very common question. We sometimes live in like a weird digital world where all we see is like kind of like what people are talking about, what people want us to hear. Go in real life, go interview 1,000 people, 1,000 women, 1,000 men, and you'll often find that these responses are very, very accurate, right? Generally speaking, a woman would want financial security, stability in her home, to marry a man who will take care of all of her needs and responsibilities. And all she needs is to make sure that she's safe and taken care of and can enjoy her life and raise a family. Generally speaking, this is the case for the majority of women in the world. Okay. Men and women have different interests, different focus, and different social styles. One is not better than the other. They're just different ways of achieving the same long-term goals. But it does not mean that both sexes need to be aware of that and make the appropriate allowances. And essentially what's important about this is to know that because men and women function differently, they can be happy differently, right? What we don't need to do is we don't need to highlight those differences and use that as chess pieces against each other, but rather we should use that as an actual growth point, that this is how marriages should be. This is what a marriage should look like, recognizing the differences in responsibility. Okay. So I want to transition to the next hadith, which is very interesting. Inshallah, I think we may have some time to answer questions here or to kind of go back and forth on this, and we may end a little bit early. But this is a very interesting hadith, also a hadith of Tirmidhi. I very much enjoyed reading this hadith. So there's different narrations on how it was read, but لم نرى للمتحابين مثل النكاح. That the Prophet ﷺ is saying, I have not seen anything, there's nothing better for two people who love each other more or other than the marriage. Meaning, the marriage is the best thing for two people who love each other. Okay, so just read this hadith for a moment. The best thing for two people who love each other is marriage. So, question: why would marriage be the best solution for two people who love each other? And it's not a trick question. I'm genuinely asking. I want to hear genuine responses. Why? Because I think we'd be surprised the responses we receive. Why people get married, why people don't get married. Okay, so just a few responses. Why is the best solution for two people who love each other to get married? Why not just stay boyfriend and girlfriend? Why not just date? Why not just do whatever you want to do and not get married? Good responses. Yeah, to keep the relationship halal, so that they don't engage in haram things. Many things that you would enjoy doing with this person go from bad to good deeds. So actually, if you look at it from a spiritual point of view, commitment, and they're forced to fulfill the rights of each other. Okay. Life is only as good as the person that you're with. Good. To regulate their emotions. Good. Good responses. Yeah, absolutely. So all of those things are right. There was no one right answer I was looking for. That's absolutely correct. People suffer. Okay, so I'm going to add this point. People suffer from love sickness. Okay. Now, this hadith seems very simple. I understand. It looks very simple and it sounds very simple. It's because it is very simple. Okay. But at the same time, think about this from not like a Muslim point of view. People love each other and don't get married. We see this all the time. People have children at their weddings, right? Usually non-Muslims, right? It's very common nowadays. You'll go to a wedding and the couple's children are there and they're married. Okay? So when we're talking about, when we talk about like people who love each other and then they get married, why do they get married? Why is the Prophet ﷺ saying this? Because think about it this way. Let's say during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people who loved each other, what would they do maybe? They would do all sorts of things, sing songs, all this other stuff, right? Poetry, I love you, whatever. So then nikah is a concept, right? The concept of marriage. Maybe it wasn't a new concept, but it's an emphasized sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, right? It's an emphasized sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to get married. So now we say, as Muslims, we get married when we love someone. So people suffer from this love sickness, right? People, young people, old people, they meet people, they love someone, and then they don't know what to do with it. They suffer. So how do people actually express their love outside of marriage? Commit zina? It's the easiest thing. Flirting and talking inappropriately. Buying each other gifts. Stalking the other person, right? When it becomes harmful, it leads to stalking. It leads to rape, right? It leads to all sorts of things. Why? I'm infatuated with you. As it happens to celebrities, right? People are in love with celebrities, so they start stalking them. They hop over their fence. They find out where they are at their favorite coffee shop and whatever, try to go meet with them. These are the detrimental harms of love sickness that goes untamed. Okay? And this is very important to explore. So what does even love sickness look like? It's not a false concept, right? This is a real thing. When you're lovesick, you may become consumed by the thought or feelings of yearning for the other person, right? You can feel lovesick from the death of a partner, right? You just miss them so much. You love them so much. You can't imagine life without them. Very interestingly, subhanAllah, the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum felt this way when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. As a matter of fact, historically, it's been documented that Omar radiallahu ta'ala anhu couldn't even literally believe it. He literally couldn't believe it, that the Prophet ﷺ passed away. When he had originally heard that the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Umar radiallahu anhu it's been reported that he said that I will physically beat somebody and assault somebody who says that the Prophet died. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ is just in muraqabah, and the Prophet ﷺ is receiving wahi from Allah. So he just went away like he normally does in the Ghar of Hira. Right? Because of his pain of the missing of the death of the Prophet until Abu Bakr Siddiq came out and said his famous statement, man kana ya'budu Muhammadan فكان فأن محمدا قد مات. Anyone who worshipped the Prophet then know that the Prophet has passed away. But anyone who worships Allah, know that Allah is the living, the ever living, and he shall not die. Only then did Umar radiallahu anhu gather himself. Another famous example is when Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he was dying, his wife was crying over him, and she was saying, Ya huzna. She was saying, Wa huzna. Oh my grief that my husband is dying. So Bilal said to his wife, no, don't say wa huzna, oh my grief. Say, rather wa farha, or ya farha, that oh my happiness, oh what joy. So why? Because he says ghadan, because it's a famous line, I'm forgetting the exact Arabic, but he says, tomorrow I'm going to meet Muhammad and his companions again. Because he knows he's going to die and he knows where he's going. Subhanallah. Subhanallah, that's ajib. That's amazing. So that pain, that suffering, that yearning can be a form of love sickness. Okay. Grieving the loss of a partner, a loved one, lacking the ability to manage emotionally or physically your connection with someone, experiencing love for the first time, missing someone who is away from you, right? Or an overall general sense of longing and missing someone. The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, they had this feeling. It's mentioned in poetry when they were exiled from Makkah Mukarramah for that period of time that they would sing poetry. When they were returned back from Umrah at Hudaybiyah, and they made the sulh there, the peace treaty there, the Sahaba, they were saying, singing poetry. Oh, Makkah, we miss Makkah. The smell of Makkah, the wind of Makkah, the mountains of Makkah. It was a longing, a yearning for it. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. So again, why is this important to mention this? And what relevance does this have? The reason why I'm mentioning this is because obviously this is more in light of, this hadith that two people who love each other, that nothing is better than them other than marriage. So the cure to that is marriage, right? Again, it's so simple, but it's very important to keep this in mind. Allama Tibi mentions here very beautifully, he says that the purest form of resolve or resolution for someone suffering from love sickness is marriage. It is the ultimate antidote to the sickness of the heart that has no other cure. He mentions that the purest form of resolving one's love, that pain, is to get married. Now, here's the thing. I want to backtrack a little bit because I know this sounds, first and foremost, like obviously, you might be thinking like, obviously, I don't understand the whole, why even mention this? Well, if you look at it from outside of the standard concepts of like a Muslim who recognizes that, look at the way people function in society. Many people don't actually think marriage is the solution. Marriage has commitment. Someone said that in the comments. There's commitment. You have to be loyal. You have to be dedicated. You have to be for this person. You have to have this tough as nails, till death do us part mentality when it comes to marriage. So people don't think that way, actually. So as much as this sounds redundant to you and I, this is not how people see marriage. If I love someone, I'm going to go and date you. If I love you, I'm going to go and be sexually intimate with you. If I love you, I'm going to go buy you gifts and I'm going to take you out. If I love you, I'm going to have children with you. I don't know, all these things, but I'm not going to marry you. For me, that's not on the table. This is how many non-Muslims think, and even some Muslims nowadays. So, but what is the best cure to that love, that attraction, that mahabba, that mawadda? Is marriage. Okay. And this is very interesting. Marriage may provide a number of psychological benefits. Marriage may provide enhanced feelings of meaning and purpose, improved sense of self, and heightened sense of mastery, meaning you overall feel like and achieve more and are generally more successful when you are married than you would be outside of that and outside of that domain, right? Again, a very important point of consideration. Married people have better mental health and physical health than unmarried people. An additional point of consideration here. Okay. So why aren't we getting married then? Okay. What are some of the reasons? What are some of the factors? Now, I also want this to take a look. I want us to take a look at the most recent 30 years. Okay. The most recent 30 years of why aren't we getting married? I feel like this is the most relevant. Okay. Now, I've talked about why nikah is so important, why this is an important concept, why as non-Muslims in the society today that we live in, people don't get married. But I want to sort of explore some options. So again, another question to everyone. Why aren't we getting married? The past 30 years. Why are people getting married? Why are people not getting married? What have become some obstacles for them? Let's be very honest with ourselves. Let's take a couple of answers. Okay, very good. Too many options people think that they can always find better. Lack of loyalty, marriage is expensive, the guys don't want to provide. Very good, fair. A focus on pleasure versus responsibility. Very interesting. That's a good point that you brought up, because that's one of the things, inshallah, I think we're going to address. Good. Any other responses? Okay. A couple more responses. Might be because of financial problems, as they have not set their career. Okay. Moral decline of society. Okay, all good responses. So here's some of the most common results. Okay, now take a look at these 7. Zina has become easier. Number 1. Zina by being with someone, right? Zina physically. There's all these apps that are accessible. Again, we're talking about the most recent 30 years. The apps that have become accessible, within literally 2 button swipes on your phone, you can have easy access to committing zina. Interestingly, our deen nikah has been made easy so that zina would be made difficult. But subhanallah, how reversed has that become nowadays, right? We've made nikah so difficult, and zina has become so easy. Number 2, cultural challenges. Families asking for incredibly high mahar or dowry. The expectations of what it means to be married from a cultural point of view is unrealistic. I was just informed not too long ago, a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, of a marriage ceremony where the husband was expected to fly his family and his relatives, the girl's family and her relatives, outside of the 2 countries that they live in, to a 3rd country for the wedding. And he had to pay for all the flights, all the hotels, and the hall, and all the food and everything. That whole thing cost him close to 40 grand. And that wasn't even the mahar. And on top of that, there was a $25,000 mahar and some other stuff that it was crazy. The whole thing ended up costing him almost $80,000 just to get married. Now, anyways, that's cultural challenges. Number 3, financial conditions, right? Certain expectations on that. I need you to be making 6 figures. I need you to be making $250,000, $500,000 salary. Otherwise, I can't marry you. Well, if that's the case, then good luck. We are making it harder for our society for our young people and people who want to marry or remarry to get married. Number 4, lack of education. This is not literal education. This is education of what it means to be married. People don't understand. People have strange ideas of what marriage looks like. Very odd concepts of like what marriage should look like, how it should be experienced, how people should feel in a marriage. A tremendous amount of pressure on people to get married and think that marriage is like what my grandfather went through, what my mom went through. Okay. Number 5, it's harder to meet people. Definitely. It's way harder. Less people are being introduced to one another. So what's happening? Again, point number 1, zina has become easier. So people are now looking for spouses in the most interesting of places. They're literally going to clubs. They're going to, places where you would not necessarily immediately think of like the ideal place to get married. Number 6, lack of compatibility. People aren't getting married as a result of that. Compatibility is an incredibly big issue here. People think that, opposites attract. No, they don't attract. They really, really don't. Opposites attract only temporarily, but very quickly that whole emotional element of being interested in someone, despite you guys having nothing in common, fades away very quickly afterwards. كل شيء يرجع إلى أصله. Everybody eventually turns back to how they once were. and they go back to their normal state. You can put on a show for a little while that, oh, we're opposites, we're totally different from one another. But if you don't have any commonalities, that marriage is not going to last. But unfortunately, what happens is حُبُّكَ شَيْئًا يُعْمِي وَيُصِمُّ, your love and infatuation for things, for a person, blinds you and makes you deaf to their, you know, their harms or the lack of compatibility. And of course, number 7 is immaturity is rampant. You have 18, 19-year-olds that are literally acting like 12-year-olds. You have 25, 30-year-olds acting like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, like they're in high school. And you have 40-year-old men who are acting like they're in college. Now, how is their confidence? And I guess that this can go both ways for sure. Women, exact same thing. Women are oftentimes struggling with the same thing, putting on an image, putting on a show, thinking like they're, I don't know what. And there's all these misconceptions with regards to marriage, which ultimately lead to this huge gaping hole in this entire marriage and matrimonial process, which is that we, our young people, are not getting married. And as a result, they're turning to everything else, turning to zina. It's easier to go on the app. It's easier to date. It's easier to find someone to have a intimate relationship with and then never see again. It's easier to look at pornography online. It's easier to have someone that you date and nobody knows about. Why? Because the mere concept of bringing up marriage is a deal breaker. And the responsibility here, I don't want to blame parents, but you as parents have to recognize this. And again, I'm not blaming parents entirely, but you as a parent have to recognize the real harm of saying no to your children because you feel like they're children. If they really are applicable in terms of like appropriate for age rather, but you are just saying no just to say no, or you are saying no because they don't meet your requirements, despite the fact that maybe they meet the basic requirements. They can hold a job, they're mature, they're stable, they're good people, good intentions, they understand the, you know, responsibilities of marriage. At least it's a starting point instead of just shutting the door in front of them entirely. And the irony here is that same child is going to then eventually go and commit zina and commit haram, or talk to a girl, talk to a boy, you know, engage in maybe pornographic material. And the result of that sin or wrong or immorality is going to come back on the family as a shame or as a blemish on the individual and on the family. And we have a role here to fulfill, an obligation, which is that as educators, as parents, we have to at least hear the person's demand. I mention this story often, but it's a good example. Once there was a young man who wanted to get married. He was still in school. And when he wanted to get married, and he told his father about this, his father said, absolutely not. So he said, Dad, listen to me. I have a plan. I want you to hear me out. His dad said, okay, fine. What's your plan? So he laid it out in front of him, whole plan. He goes, yes, I'm still in school. I'm still in college, but I want to marry this girl. And I think that if I married her, I would save myself from committing zina. Then the father very quickly shot down his idea and says, yes, but then you'll also drop out of school and you'll be broke and you won't have a future and you have ruined everything because you didn't have you didn't build that future that you were thinking to build. So in desperation, the son said, okay, well, you've got a point there. Go talk to Shaykh Jabir, call him up and meet with him. So he messages me. I meet with him in person. He actually sets up an appointment to meet with me in person. And the father literally brought an entire notebook like a blueprint, and he put it in front of me and he says, let's come up with a plan that if is reasonable and realistic, I can help my son get married while he is in college. And I must admit, that was the first time I have ever interacted with a parent who was not only that open, but actually involved in seeing that come to fruition. And what was very interesting about that is he actually came up with a very good plan. He says that, well, I could, and the plan was very interesting, but he basically, in summary, said that because both the girl's father and the guy's father were paying separate tuition, separate fees for housing. So he said, if we can combine their housing, they get married, they live in the same apartment while they're at school, they both complete their education, but since they're married now, they can spend time together, they can hang out, they can further develop their love and their attraction to one another, make the relationship halal. They both agree to complete school. After they complete school, we, as parents, stop paying for their bills, and immediately after they graduate, they pay their own bills moving forward because they'd have graduated. They will have an opportunity for internship. They'll have opportunity for jobs, but that's the agreement. That from the time you graduate, whatever it was, like 8 months after you graduate, you're on your own. And that's it. And if you're willing to accept that responsibility, then you can go. The dad literally said, I don't care if you end up working at a Walmart. I don't care if you work up at a gas station. You're on your own. The son agreed. The girl agreed. The parents agreed. And they got married, a year and a half or 2 years before they graduated. Which is, again, may not work for everybody, but the idea here was that the parents' role was to hear the conversation. The parents' roles was to engage in dialogue so as to acknowledge that my college-age son is expressing something which obviously makes sense for a college-age student to express, which is his attraction to a woman. So in any case, like I said, I don't want this to get for us to just get distracted from the subject or the topic. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Lam yura or lam tura lil mutahabaini mithlu nikah," that there is no marriage better than the nikah for two people who love each other. There's no concept that's better other than marriage. As Muslims, we get married. We is within our tradition, our culture, and it's our emphasized sunnah that we do get married when a person finds attraction for another person. And we have to recognize all of the outlets for that and its application, as whether we're siblings, parents, friends, family, the individual, right? We need to recognize its value, and we need to recognize how to implement that into our own lives. So with that, inshallah, I think it's a good place to stop here. We don't need to go to the next hadith, inshallah, at least for now. We will save that for next Tuesday's class, inshallah. Otherwise, yeah, okay. So otherwise, inshallah, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and stop here. I will see everyone again next Tuesday, same time at 8 p.m. I encourage everyone, if you can, inshallah, to please try to show up promptly at 8, inshallah, so we can discuss a little bit more, have more time for conversation. And if anybody has any other questions, inshallah, I will just put my email address here again. There you go. So that's my email address. Yes. So inshallah, you can email me and I can help answer some of your questions, inshallah. In this regard, because I am a therapist by profession, there is an offering. I'll just mention this to everyone before we wrap up here, is that there, if anyone would like to ask a question, there are 2 resources that you can use. One is you can make a therapy session with me at wasilaconnections.org. If you go there, you can make a full therapy session, or if you only wanted to consult with me, there's a professional religious consultation service as well. So you can select that and use that as a resource as well to make a session with me. The therapy session is about an hour long, and the consultation is only half an hour. But that's where you can ask sort of questions, one-off questions that may be more specific to a relationship or a scenario. And inshallah, hopefully that may be of some help. So if anybody needs that, of course, the website is wasilaconnect.org. So with that, inshallah, we'll go ahead and stop here. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayh. We'll see everyone, inshallah, next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.